The soft hum of air conditioners filled the banking hall that morning. Customers stood in line, scrolling through their phones, whispering impatiently. It was just another busy Lagos morning until the glass doors slid open and an old woman stepped inside. She looked out of place immediately. Her once blue lace gown was stained with dried mud. Her slippers were uneven, the soles almost worn off. Her grey hair was scattered like she hadn't combed it in days, and her small, faded handbag dangled from her trembling hand. Every head turned. Sandra, the customer service officer nearest to the entrance, narrowed her eyes. "Who let this woman in here?" she whispered, leaning toward her colleague Juliet. Juliet giggled. "Maybe she's lost, or she came to beg." The old woman, Madame Olivia, stood quietly, glancing around with eyes that carried both gentleness and wisdom. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Good morning, my daughters. Please, I came to make a transaction." The laughter from behind the counter was instant. Sandra covered her mouth. Juliet folded her arms. Adana, another teller, rolled her eyes and muttered, "Transaction? In this state? Madam, a beg? This is a bank, not a charity." But Madame Olivia didn't argue. She simply moved closer to the counter, her voice steady this time. "I said I came to make a transaction. Please, attend to me." Sandra leaned forward, her tone mocking. "Mama, even if you want to make a transaction, where's your account number? Or you want to deposit sand?" Laughter erupted again, echoing across the hall. Other customers began murmuring, some shaking their heads, some smirking. A security guard, tall and muscular, stepped forward cautiously. "Madam, please, you can't stand here disturbing customers. Let's go outside, I beg." "I'm not disturbing anyone," Madame Olivia said softly. "I'm just asking to be attended to like every other person." Juliet scoffed. "Please, remove her, before she brings bad luck here. Just look at her. Even her bag is older than this building." The guard hesitated. "Madam, please, I said leave me." Madame Olivia snapped suddenly, her voice carrying authority that made the guard freeze. For a brief moment, the hall fell silent. Her tone was commanding, different, it carried weight. But then Sandra laughed again. "NN, so she can shout too. I beg, carry her out." The guard obeyed. He gently held her by the arm and dragged her toward the door. Customers whispered as she stumbled, clutching her old handbag tighter. "See how dirty she is," one woman muttered. "She's probably mad," another man added. Outside the glass doors, the hot sun burned down on her wrinkled skin. She looked through the transparent wall at the same people laughing, and something inside her broke. Not out of shame, but disappointment. She had seen greed, pride, and disrespect before, but never from her own staff. Because inside that old muddy gown was no ordinary woman. She was Madame Olivia Benson, founder and chief executive officer of Golden Trust Microfinance Bank, the very institution whose staff had just humiliated her. She slowly opened her bag and brought out something that didn't match her appearance at all. A brand new iPhone 15 Pro Max. Its silver body gleamed under the sunday. She tapped the screen calmly and dialed a number. "Jerry Anderson," she said, her tone cold. "Come to your branch now." On the other end, Jerry, the branch manager, immediately recognized the voice. He jumped from his chair. "Madame Olivia? Ma, where are you?" "Outside your branch," she said and hung up. 10 minutes later, a sleek black SUV screeched to a stop in front of the bank. Jerry ran out, sweat dripping from his forehead. As he rushed in, his staff stood straighter, pretending to work. Sandra whispered to Juliet, "Why is the manager panicking like this? I heard him say something about Madame Olivia." Juliet replied nervously, "Maybe she's coming today." Jerry's voice thundered as he entered. "Where is Madame Olivia Benson? Has she been here already?" Sandra blinked. "No, sir. We haven't seen her." Juliet nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. No one like that has entered today." "Are you sure?" Jerry's tone was sharp. "Yes, sir," they chorused. Just then, the glass doors opened again, and in walked the same old woman they had mocked. Her head was held high, her steps calm and deliberate. Jerry froze, his jaw dropped. Madame Olivia?" Sandra's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" Juliet gasped. She's the CEO." The entire hall went dead silent. Every customer stopped moving. Jerry bowed deeply. I didn't recognize you were here earlier. I am deeply sorry. Don't apologize for them, Jerry, Madame Olivia interrupted. Her voice was calm but heavy. Apologize for yourself, too, for not training your staff better. It will. Sandra trembled, her legs weak. Juliet's lips shook. Adana's eyes filled with tears. I stood in your bank for 15 minutes, Madame Olivia continued, and not one person treated me like a human being. Instead, you mocked me, laughed at me, and threw me out. Tell me, is this how you handle the people who trust us with their lives and savings? No one could speak. Madame Olivia turned slowly to the security guard. And you, next time, before you lay a hand on an elderly woman, ask yourself if you're protecting the bank or humiliating it. The guard swallowed hard, his head bowed. She then faced the staff. Sandra, Juliet, Adana, hand over your ID cards. You're hereby dismissed, effective immediately. Sandra dropped to her knees, crying, Please, Ma, it was a mistake. We didn't know. That's the point, Madame Olivia said quietly. You didn't know. And yet you judged me. Tears streamed down Juliet's cheeks as she whispered, Please forgive us, Ma. We've learned our lesson. But Madame Olivia only turned and walked toward the exit. The same people who mocked her earlier now watched with fear and shame. As she stepped into her SUV, she glanced back at the glass doors of her bank, her empire, and sighed deeply. It wasn't anger that filled her heart. It was disappointment. Inside, Sandra sat on the floor sobbing. Juliet buried her face in her palms. Adana leaned against the counter, whispering, We just threw away our future. Outside, the billionaire CEO stared out the car window as it drove away, her eyes distant. The world saw her as strong and untouchable, but right now, she felt something heavy in her chest. She knew she had done the right thing, yet she couldn't stop wondering if there had been another way, another chance, another lesson. And that thought would soon change everything. It had been 3 weeks since the incident at the bank, but the memory of that morning still haunted Madame Olivia like a shadow. She sat by the wide glass window of her mansion in Ikoyi, overlooking the city skyline. The golden sunset reflected off the calm waters below, painting the sky in soft orange hues. But her mind wasn't on the beauty outside. It was on the faces of those 3 young women she had dismissed. Sandra, Juliet, Adana. She could still see the shock on their faces when they realized who she was. She remembered Sandra's tears, Juliet's trembling hands, and Adana's silent shame. Jerry, the branch manager, had since replaced them with new staff, efficient, polite, and well-trained. The bank's operations were smoother than ever, but Madame Olivia's heart wasn't. Something about the incident didn't sit right with her. She sipped her tea slowly, her thoughts heavy. Maybe, she murmured to herself, I was too harsh. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Her butler, Mr. Kohler, stepped in, holding a small pile of envelopes. Madam, more letters came for you today, he said. From who? He glanced down. Same as yesterday, and the day before. From those girls, Sandra, Juliet, and Adana. Madame Olivia's hand froze mid-air. Again? Yes, Ma. They've sent letters every day since last week. Leave them on the table, she said quietly. When he left, she stared at the pile of letters. Each was handwritten, the names scribbled in shaky ink. She hesitated before opening one, the first, from Sandra. Dear Madame Olivia, I know I don't deserve your attention, but please hear me out. I have been out of work since that day. My mother depends on me, and we've been surviving on borrowed food from neighbors. Every night, I replay that moment in the bank and cry. I thought you were just a poor woman looking for help. I forgot that dignity belongs to everyone, rich or poor. I've learned my lesson in the most painful way. Please forgive me. I don't ask for my job back. I just want your forgiveness. Ma. Sandra. And faced, Madame Olivia closed her eyes. The words hit deeper than she expected. She reached for another envelope, this one from Juliet. Dear Madam, since that day, I've not been able to sleep. My friends mocked me when they saw the video online. Someone recorded the scene and posted it on TikTok. I was the girl laughing at an old woman, and now the world laughs at me. I've received threats and insults. My father hasn't spoken to me since. I was proud and shallow. I forgot my humanity. Please, Madame Olivia, I am not writing because I want my position back. I am writing because I want to start again, a better person this time. Juliet. The next one was from Adana, written in the smallest, neatest handwriting. Dear Ma, I want to apologize not just for what we did, but for what we became. That day, I joined in mocking you because I didn't want to look weak before my colleagues. But when I saw Jerry bow before you, I realized what true strength looks like, humility. Since then, I've been volunteering at a small NGO that helps old women on the streets. Each time I feed one, I remember the pain in your eyes. Please, Ma, forgive us. I promise you, that mistake will never happen again. Adana, Madame Olivia folded the letters carefully, her chest rising and falling with quiet emotion. The evening light bathed her face as tears gathered in her eyes. Everyone deserves a second chance, she whispered. That night, she barely slept. She thought of how her late husband, Chief Benson, used to say, "The greatest leaders are those who can see beyond a person's mistake and find the lesson in it." When morning came, she made a decision. At exactly 10 a.m. She arrived at the same bank branch, this time in her elegant black SUV. Dressed in a royal blue gown and matching gele, the staff stood in line, bowing respectfully as she entered. "Good morning, Madame Olivia," they chorused. "Good morning," she replied softly. Jerry came forward, smiling nervously. "Ma, this is an honor. How may we serve you today?" She looked around the hall. Everything was spotless. Even the marble floor seemed to shine brighter than usual. "Jerry," she said, "call me Sandra, Juliet, and Adana." Jerry blinked in surprise. "Ma, they no longer work here." "I know," she said calmly. "But I believe you still have their contact numbers. Tell them to come here. I want to see them." Jerry didn't argue. Within an hour, 3 nervous young women walked into the hall, their eyes downcast. Sandra looked thinner. Juliet's eyes were red from sleepless nights. Adana clutched her purse as if holding on to hope. They bowed deeply when they saw Madame Olivia. "Good morning, Ma," Sandra whispered. "Good morning, Ma," Juliet and Adana echoed. "Sit down," Madame Olivia said gently. They sat on the edge of the chairs, afraid to look up. "I read your letters," she began. "All of them." Sandra's hands shook. Juliet bit her lip. Madame Olivia continued, "You made a mistake, a painful one. But what matters most is that you've learned. It takes courage to admit you were wrong." Tears rolled down Sandra's cheeks. "Thank you, Ma. We truly have." "Good," Madame Olivia said softly, "because I'm giving you a second chance." The girls gasped in disbelief. "You will be reinstated," Madame Olivia continued, "but not in the same positions. You'll start lower, earn your way back. This time, not with pride, but with humility and heart." Juliet fell to her knees, sobbing. "Thank you, Ma. I swear, you won't regret this." Adana clasped her hands together. "God bless you, Ma. Thank you for forgiving us." Madame Olivia smiled faintly. "Don't thank me. Prove to me and to yourselves that you've changed." As they left her office that day, the 3 women hugged each other tightly. Their tears weren't of shame anymore, but of gratitude. For the first time in weeks, Madame Olivia felt peace. She had done what her heart whispered was right. What she didn't know was that by opening the door of forgiveness, she had also opened the door to a love story that would soon shake her family in ways she never imagined. Because, as fate would have it, Sandra was about to meet someone who would change her life and tie her destiny to Madame Olivia's forever. The next few months were peaceful. The Golden Trust Bank branch that had once echoed with mockery now carried a new spirit of humility. Sandra, Juliet, and Adana came early every morning, smiling warmly at customers, attending to even the poorest with care. They had truly changed. Madame Olivia sometimes visited quietly, not as the CEO, but as a silent observer. She would stand by the far end of the hall, watching them without revealing herself, and her heart would warm with quiet pride. But fate, unpredictable as the Lagos rain, was already weaving something bigger behind the scenes. It was a bright Saturday afternoon when Sandra received a call from Madame Olivia's personal assistant. "Madame said you should come to the mansion today. She wants to see you," the woman said politely. Sandra froze mid-step. "Me? To her house?" "Yes. By 4 p.m. Don't be late." Her heart raced as she ended the call. She looked around her small apartment in Yaba, the iron window frame, the humming fridge, the small photo of her late parents on the wall. She couldn't believe the woman she once mocked now trusted her enough to invite her home. By 3:30 p.m., She stood outside Madame Olivia's white mansion in Ikoyi. The compound was breathtaking, a neatly trimmed garden, marble steps, and a fountain shaped like a dove at the center. A security guard led her in. "Madam is expecting you, Ma." When she entered the sitting room, Sandra paused. The interior was grand but peaceful. White walls, framed paintings, and the scent of vanilla candles filled the air. Madame Olivia sat on a cream sofa, dressed in a simple silk wrapper and soft headscarf. She looked up with a smile. "Sandra, my dear." Sandra knelt instantly. "Good afternoon, Ma." "Get up, my child," Madame Olivia said kindly. "You are my staff, not my servant." Sandra rose shyly. "I invited you because I've been observing you," Madame Olivia said. "Your growth at the bank has been impressive. You've become the most polite and helpful teller in the branch." Sandra blushed. "Thank you, Ma. You gave me another chance. I didn't want to waste it." Madame Olivia nodded slowly. "You remind me of my younger self, stubborn but full of heart." They both laughed softly. Then, unexpectedly, a voice came from behind. "Mama, I didn't know you had company." Sandra turned, and time seemed to freeze. A tall, handsome man stood by the doorway, wearing a white shirt and navy trousers. His skin glowed under the warm chandelier light, his smile charming yet calm. "This is my son, Jacob," Madame Olivia said proudly. "He just returned from Boston last week." Sandra quickly bowed her head. "Good afternoon, sir." Jacob grinned. "Good afternoon. Please, don't call me sir. I'm not that old." They laughed. Madame Olivia gestured toward him. "Jacob, meet Sandra, one of my most hard-working staff at the bank." Sandra's cheeks flushed slightly. "Thank you, Ma." Jacob's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than usual. "It's nice to meet you, Sandra. I've heard about you. Mama talks a lot about the 3 girls she forgave." Sandra's smile dimmed. "I still can't forgive myself for what I did that day." Jacob's tone softened. "But she did, and that's all that matters now." "Is there?" Madame Olivia, watching the subtle spark between them, smiled knowingly, but said nothing. The weeks that followed brought Sandra and Jacob into each other's paths more often. Whenever Madame Olivia needed help with sorting bank reports or reviewing customer service feedback, she would ask Sandra to bring them to her mansion. And every time Sandra came, Jacob was around, sometimes reading in the garden, sometimes fixing something around the house. They started talking. At first, it was casual about work, the weather, or Lagos traffic. But soon, their conversations grew deeper. They shared laughter, dreams, fears. Sandra told him about her late mother and how she struggled to survive after losing her job. Jacob told her about his lonely years abroad, how even money couldn't fill the emptiness of being far from home. One evening, as the rain drummed softly on the windows, they sat in the garden's gazebo. Jacob leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Sandra, I don't know how to say this, but you've brought light into this house." Sandra's eyes widened. "Me? Yes," he said. "Since you came, Mama laughs more. She's happier. And I feel something I haven't felt in years." Sandra's heart pounded. "Jacob, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," he whispered. "Just let it be." They sat in silence for a while, the sound of rain washing over them, their hearts quietly connecting. A few days later, Madame Olivia called Sandra into her office. "My dear," she began, "I see the way you and my son look at each other. Don't be afraid, I'm not angry." Sandra's face turned red. "Ma, I swear, we didn't plan anything. I respect you too much." "I know," Madame Olivia interrupted gently. "And that's why I trust you. Love is strange. It comes when you least expect it. If Jacob has chosen you, then I'm happy." Sandra blinked in disbelief. You? You approve?" Madame Olivia smiled. "Of course. I've seen your heart. You made mistakes, yes, but you've changed, and that's what matters most." Tears filled Sandra's eyes as she knelt. "Thank you, Ma. I will never forget this." Madame Olivia touched her shoulder. "Stand up, my daughter. You've already proven yourself." A few months later, Sandra and Jacob's love blossomed beautifully. They attended church together, went on family dinners, and soon their engagement became public. The news spread quickly across the bank. "Can you believe it?" Juliet whispered to Adana one morning. "Sandra is marrying Madame Olivia's son." Adana smiled. "God works in mysterious ways, from disgrace to grace." But as wedding preparations began, Sandra couldn't stop thinking about how far she had come from the homeless old woman she mocked to becoming her future mother-in-law. Life had truly turned full circle, and though she was filled with gratitude, Sandra couldn't shake one silent fear. Would the world ever let her forget who she used to be? The morning sun poured through the cathedral's tall stained-glass windows, painting the white aisle with rays of red, gold, and blue. The choir's voices filled the air with soft hymns as guests in shimmering attires filled the seats, whispering in excitement. The day had finally come, the wedding of Sandra Okafor and Jacob Benson, the only son of Madame Olivia Benson, billionaire CEO of Golden Trust Bank. It was the kind of event Lagos would talk about for months. The parking lot sparkled with luxury cars, Bentleys, Range Rovers, and sleek Lexus sedans. Inside, reporters from top media outlets waited eagerly for a glimpse of the couple. But behind the glitz, there was something deeper, almost sacred, the story of forgiveness, redemption, and love that had led to this moment. Sandra stood before the mirror in her dressing room, her heart pounding. Her wedding gown, a soft ivory lace, shimmered under the warm light. Her friends Juliet and Adana fussed over her veil, whispering encouragement. "You look like a queen," Juliet said with a grin. Sandra smiled faintly. "I still can't believe all this is real." "It is," Adana said, "and you deserve it. Don't ever forget that." Just then, a gentle knock came on the door. The door opened slowly, and in walked Madame Olivia. She looked regal in her silver lace gown and coral beads, her grey hair neatly styled under her matching head tie. But her eyes were soft, warm, motherly. When Sandra saw her, tears welled in her eyes. She quickly knelt. "Mama." Her voice cracked. "I still don't know how to thank you for all this, for forgiving me, for letting me be a part of your family." Madame Olivia placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "My daughter, you've already thanked me by becoming the woman you are today." Sandra looked up, her eyes shining. Madame Olivia smiled through tears. "From the day I saw you kneeling on that banking hall floor, crying for forgiveness, I knew God wasn't done with you. He was rewriting your story." And so Kamar, she helped Sandra up, adjusted her veil, and whispered, "Today, I'm walking you down the aisle. You lost your parents, but today, I'll be both your mother and your father." Sandra burst into quiet sobs and hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Mama. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." Moments later, the grand doors of the church swung open. The organ thundered. Everyone rose to their feet. Madame Olivia held Sandra's hand as they walked down the aisle together, step by step. Flashlights flickered, phones recorded. Some guests whispered, "That's her, the same girl who once mocked her." But Madame Olivia held her head high. She didn't care about the whispers. To her, this was more than a wedding. It was redemption made visible. Jacob stood at the altar in a crisp white tuxedo, his smile wide, his eyes glistening. When he saw Sandra, his breath caught. To him, she wasn't just the girl he fell in love with. She was the proof that grace could change a person completely. When they reached the altar, Madame Olivia placed Sandra's hand in Jacob's. Her voice trembled. "Jacob," she said, "take care of her. She's not perfect, but she has a good heart. And Sandra, take care of my son. Love him truly, not for what he has, but for who he is." "I promise, Mama," Sandra whispered, tears streaming down her face. The ceremony went on beautifully. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped on trembling fingers, and when the priest finally declared them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause. Jacob kissed Sandra's forehead softly, as tears rolled down her cheeks. That evening, at the reception, laughter filled the massive hall. The decor was breathtaking: golden chandeliers, white roses, and soft instrumental music. Guests danced, clapped, and ate as cameras flashed endlessly. Madame Olivia watched them from her table, her heart swelling with pride. This was her family now rebuilt, restored, renewed. She raised her glass and said quietly to herself, "Grace has found its way home." But as the months passed after the wedding, a new silence began to creep into Sandra and Jacob's home. The kind of silence that follows expectation unmet. At first, it was subtle. Friends would ask casually, "So, when are you two having a baby?" Sandra would laugh softly and say, "Soon, by God's grace." But soon turned into someday, and someday turned into uneasy silence. 2 years passed. The once cheerful conversations became shorter. The medical visits became more frequent. Each negative test result came like a small heartbreak wrapped in paper. Sandra cried quietly at night sometimes, holding Jacob's hand. "Maybe it's my fault," she whispered one night. "Maybe God is punishing me for my past." Jacob squeezed her hand. "Don't ever say that again," he said gently. "You are not being punished. We'll be fine. We have each other, and that's enough." But inside, he too was hurting. They tried everything, prayers, doctors, herbal remedies, but nothing changed. Then, one rainy evening, as thunder rolled across the sky, Sandra sat in the living room, her eyes fixed on the empty cradle she had bought out of hope. The door creaked, and Madame Olivia walked in quietly, holding an umbrella. "Mama?" Sandra stood quickly, surprised. Madame Olivia smiled faintly. "I came to see my daughter. I know what you're going through." Sandra's eyes filled with tears. "Mama, I'm so sorry. I feel like I've failed you. You gave me everything, and I can't even give you a grandchild." Madame Olivia took her hands gently and said, "My daughter, don't ever measure your worth by what you don't have. I didn't forgive you because of what you could give me. I forgave you because of who you could become." Sandra broke down, sobbing into her hands. Madame Olivia continued softly, "If God wants to bless you with a child, He will. And if He doesn't, that's okay too. You and Jacob are my children already. Nothing will ever change that." Just then, Jacob walked in, soaked from the rain, and paused when he saw them. Sandra ran into his arms, crying, "Mama says we're enough." Jacob hugged both women tightly. His voice was choked. "She's right. We are enough." The three of them stood there in the warm living room, rain pattering against the windows, holding onto each other, not as a billionaire family or a forgiven employee, but as a family built on grace. Outside, the storm slowly faded, giving way to the calm of night. But deep within the silence, something stirred the faint whisper of destiny still unfolding. Because unknown to them, God was about to surprise them in a way that would make every tear worth it. The morning was quiet in Lekki. The rising sun painted the lagoon gold, and a cool breeze rustled through the curtains of Sandra and Jacob's bedroom. Sandra stirred awake slowly, feeling the familiar emptiness beside her. Jacob had already left for work. She sat up, wrapping her shawl around herself, her eyes landing on the small wooden cross above their bed. It had been 3 years since the wedding. 3 long years of waiting, praying, hoping. Every test, every doctor's visit, every whispered, "Next time," had drained her. Yet she still believed that one day, God would remember her. That morning, she knelt beside the bed and prayed softly. "Father, I don't know what your plan is, but please, give me peace, even if you never give me a child." Her voice trembled, but her heart was calm. She had finally reached a place of surrender. That afternoon, she visited Madame Olivia at the mansion, as she often did on weekends. The older woman was sitting in her favorite garden chair, wearing a simple white lace gown, a scarf tied loosely around her silver hair. She looked peaceful, her Bible open on her lap. Sandra smiled faintly as she approached. "Good afternoon, Mama." "Ah, my daughter." Madame Olivia beamed. "You look tired. Come, sit with me." Sandra sat down beside her, leaning gently on her shoulder. "I just miss Jacob. He's been busy lately with the new bank branch." "That's good," Madame Olivia said warmly. "Hard work keeps the mind alive." "But you, my dear, how are you?" Sandra sighed. "I'm fine. I've stopped worrying about the baby thing. If God wants it to happen, He will." Madame Olivia smiled knowingly. "That's my girl. Faith isn't about getting what you want. It's about trusting God even when you don't." Sandra nodded, and they sat quietly, listening to the birds. After a while, Madame Olivia turned to her. "Do you know what I prayed for this morning?" "What, Mama?" She smiled gently. "I told God, if you won't give Sandra a child, then make her joy overflow in another way. I don't know how He'll answer, but He always does." Sandra chuckled softly. "You always know what to say." Madame Olivia reached for her hand. "That's what mothers do." A few weeks later, Jacob convinced Sandra to take a short trip with him to Obudu Cattle Ranch, a place of quiet hills and cool air. He wanted her to relax, away from the city and all its noise. They spent the weekend walking along the hills, laughing and taking photos. It was their first real vacation in years. On their last day there, Sandra felt dizzy. She laughed it off, thinking it was the altitude. But when it happened again the next morning, Jacob grew concerned. Let's check when we get back to Lagos, he said. Sandra agreed. Back in the city, she went to see their family doctor. It was supposed to be a quick visit, just routine tests. But when the nurse called her back in, the doctor's face was glowing. Mrs. Benson, he said with a smile. I don't know how to say this, but congratulations, you're pregnant. Sandra froze. What did you just say? The doctor chuckled. You're about 6 weeks pregnant. It's early, but the signs are clear. Tears flooded her eyes instantly. She covered her mouth, unable to speak. After all the years of waiting, praying, hoping God had done it, she burst into tears. Oh my God! Oh my God! Jacob was at home, working on his laptop, when the door burst open. Sandra ran in, crying and laughing all at once. Jacob! She screamed. Jacob, it happened! He stood up, confused. What happened? Are you okay? She threw the test result into his hands. Look! He stared, then looked up slowly. You're pregnant? Sandra nodded, sobbing uncontrollably. Jacob dropped the paper, wrapped his arms around her, and lifted her off the floor. Thank you, Jesus, he shouted, tears streaming down his face. They cried, laughed, and prayed right there on the living room floor. When they finally calmed down, Sandra whispered, We have to tell Mama. Jacob smiled through tears. She'll probably faint. When they arrived at the mansion that evening, Madame Olivia was sitting in the same garden chair, reading. Mama, Sandra called out, her voice shaking with joy. Madame Olivia looked up, smiling. Ah, my children, you're glowing today. What's the news? Sandra knelt before her, unable to hold back tears. Mama, God has done it. I'm pregnant. For a moment, silence hung in the air, and then Madame Olivia gasped, her Bible dropping from her hands. Jesus Christ of Nazareth, she cried, standing up in shock. Sandra nodded, sobbing. It's true, Mama. The doctor confirmed it. Madame Olivia placed her hands over her mouth, trembling as tears streamed down her cheeks. Oh God, after all these years, you still remembered us. She pulled Sandra into her arms and cried loudly, not from sorrow, but from overwhelming gratitude. My daughter, you see, God's time is not our time. He was never late. He was just waiting for the right season. Jacob joined them, wrapping his arms around both women. Thank you, Lord. Madame Olivia whispered through tears. You've turned my test into testimony. Months passed, and the house was filled with joy. Every day, Madame Olivia sang songs of thanksgiving. She accompanied Sandra to her checkups, cooked for her, and even redecorated one of the rooms as a nursery. Finally, one quiet night, as rain fell softly on the roof, Sandra went into labor. Hours later, the cries of a newborn filled the hospital room. The nurse smiled as she placed the baby in Sandra's arms. Congratulations, Mrs. Benson, it's a girl. Sandra looked down at the tiny face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jacob stood beside her, speechless, holding her hand. When Madame Olivia entered, her heart nearly stopped at the sight, her daughter-in-law cradling her granddaughter. Sandra looked up at her and whispered, Mama, meet your granddaughter, Olivia Grace Benson. The older woman broke down completely, falling to her knees beside the bed. Thank you, Jesus, she cried. You brought grace to my home. She gently touched the baby's tiny fingers, whispering, You'll never know how long we waited for you. As weeks turned into months, their mansion echoed with laughter again. Sandra had found peace. Jacob found joy. Madame Olivia found legacy. Sometimes, when she sat in the garden, watching little Olivia Grace sleep in her arms, she would smile softly and whisper to herself, Is greater than once. They mocked me in my own bank. Once, they threw me out like I was nothing. But God lifted me high, not to prove a point, but to teach the world that forgiveness is stronger than pride, and kindness, no matter how small, always comes back home. The gentle evening wind would rustle the flowers as if heaven itself agreed. And somewhere deep inside her heart, Madame Olivia knew the story that began in humiliation had ended in a miracle. A story only God could have written. If you like this story, comment, share and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.